West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Donald Trump is sending a panicked email to those on his email list telling them that he may go to jail for the rest of his life and that you better give him some money because he's very nervous about going to prison and that this may be the last message he ever sends. Don't threaten me with a good time. And how much do I need to pay you for you to go to prison for the rest of your life? Here's the email. The subject says, this could be the last email I ever send. And here's the email that he sent out. It says, friend, I will never stop speaking my mind, but that means that the filthy Biden judge could throw me in jail at any moment. Corrupt Fani Willis already arrested me. Crooked Judge Merchan can do it next. So before I step back into that New York courtroom and face the possibility of life in prison, I need to know, are there any final words you'd like to share with me? If it comes down to it, I will gladly go to jail to defend you and the Constitution. I would do anything for you. That's why it would mean so much to hear from you, friend, at this critical moment. It could all end tomorrow, so please respond to Trump today. And then when you click respond, he begs you for money. I do want to share this with you, though, because on Friday, Donald Trump said that he couldn't read from some of the articles that he was being handed by the staff member who he pays hundreds of thousands of dollars to follow him around with a portable printer and give him favorable articles because he was afraid to go to jail. So on Friday, he was saying that he couldn't read the articles because he was afraid to go to jail, and now he's basically saying that if it comes down to it, he will gladly go to jail and that he will go to jail for the rest of his life, but you got to give him money, he says. You got to give him money. And then he says this filthy Biden judge, that's what he calls the judge a filthy Biden. Just despicable as that. Is going to put him in jail for the rest of his life. Just to remind you, here's what Donald Trump said on Friday. Let me show you that. So as Donald Trump is sending these panicked messages, I just looked as well at like what were the recent messages that he's been sending recently, and they're all like this, and they're all weird. Like how about this one that he sent? You know I like shiny things. And then it says, do you need a hug? And then he sends an email that says, I love you. And then he sends an email saying, I'm being held hostage! Exclamation point. And then he sends one, my farewell message. So saying he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. Then he goes, I'm trapped in court. And here's another one. Keep your filthy hands off of me. And then the other one, like a sociopathic stalker, he goes, knock, knock. That's one of the emails. I mean, again, how strange is this stuff? By the way, take a look at what he's been posting as well as he's sending those panic messages. So as he's sending messages saying that he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life, but you got to give him money. He's posting on his social media, GetTrumpSneakers.com. Trump, it says. And then some of these other posts, like this one from a QAnon account, Fruit Snacks. That's the name of the account, Fruit Snacks, that posts all this Q stuff. If a judge can issue ridiculous gag orders against Trump, imagine what they will do to the average American person. I know what a judge would do with the average American person. If an average American person did anything like Donald Trump did, they actually would be in prison for the rest of their life. The first time they violated a gag order, not after 10 times, and the judge is like, oh, I have to give you another stern warning and another $1,000 penalty. Here's another post that Donald Trump makes. No matter how many stories you write, indictments you open, riots you start, or illnesses you spread, I will always have Trump's back. Read truth if you agree. That's what he's posting. He's also posting memes like this, attacking his former Vice President Mike Pence and saying that Pence, former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, who he draws devil horns on, and President Biden are conspiring against him. I know corporate media doesn't think that, oh, that's newsworthy that he's doing these things, but I don't know. I think that it's worthy of coverage where the leader of a political party is drawing devil horns on a former Speaker of the House and accusing the former Democratic Speaker of the House of colluding with his former Vice President to try to tamper with elections, which is 100% false. Call me a little bit old-fashioned. Call me a little bit just old-fashioned, but I think that there's something incredibly wrong with that. And then, by the way, as Donald Trump's making these posts, you want a hug? I need a hug. I'm going to jail. All these weird things. He sends his son to go on right-wing media, and here's what Eric had to say about the Stormy Daniels testimony. Play the clip.
And they had the entire DA's office, the entire might of the New York DA's office. I am talking about the top brass in that office. They are all in that courtroom. And as Stormy Daniels goes up there, they are giddy. They're laughing. They're smiling at one another. This is their big moment.
Here's more of Eric Trump whining on right-wing media. Play it.
Then I get to watch and sit right behind my father in the first pew as they try and slander him. They try and keep him off the campaign trail. They try and waste his time. They try and destroy his reputation and his image with a nonsense case. No one believes that the Democrats are going after my father for 34 felony counts. Think about this. 34 felony counts for a $130,000 retainer to a lawyer that was billed as a retainer from a lawyer to a lawyer that was booked as a legal expense in a city where you can't go into CVS, and buy shampoo because it's locked behind plexiglass because there's so much theft.
Here's one more clip of whiny Eric. Play the clip.
And you mean to tell me they're going after the former president of the United States, the 45th president of the United States, and very likely the 47th president of the United States, a guy who is beating Biden in every single swing state, over $130,000 from 8 years ago? That was a personal expense? Give me a break. The world doesn't believe it. And there's only...
What else is going on in Magadonia world? Well, you have Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, partying with Donald Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba. They're out there living up the high life on the RNC expense card. Look at them enjoy. That's what they've been doing this weekend. Then you go to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and here's what she has to say. She says that Trump told her privately that he wants to get rid of MAGA Mike Johnson, just he's waiting for the right time. Play this clip.
And I just spoke with President Trump yesterday about this, and while he says now is not the time, I'm going to be listening to him, but he also said, and he said it in his statement publicly, that it may happen, that the time may come. So even though if I wanted to do it again this week, the Democrats have already stepped in and saved Johnson. But again, I'll reiterate this, Maria, and the most important thing everyone needs to know is the people want a Republican Party that will fight.
And I love this from the Biden campaign. Here's the video. Here's the recent video or ad that they cut of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump. Chef's kiss, perfect right here. Play the clip.
I absolutely love Marjorie Taylor Greene.
The so-called plane that crashed into the Pentagon. It's odd. There's never any evidence shown for a plane in the Pentagon. But anyways, I'm not going to dive into the 9/11 conspiracy.
She's got spirit.
If you want to be a big girl, you need to get rid of your diaper and come out and be able to talk to the American citizens instead of us having to use a little flap.
She's got fight. She's got spunk.
No, why don't you go talk about Jewish space lasers, and really, why don't you off? How about that?
Thanks. Thank you very much.
And I believe she'll be around and on our side for a long time to come.
That's what Q has been telling everyone. Q is trying to tell people on these forums and 4chan, and he's trying to tell people the truth.
Over the weekend as well, one of the people who are closest to Donald Trump, this guy named John McKinty, who was actually kicked out at first of the Trump administration when he was flagged, I believe, by like the FBI and for real serious things on his background, and he was kind of kicked out, and then he came back right around the insurrection. He's like one of the main voices for this Project 2025, and he's going to be basically running that for Donald Trump if Trump were to ever take over again. And this was a video that this individual, McKenty, MAGA Republican, big kind of Trumper, made of himself. Play this clip.
So I always keep this fake Hollywood money in my car, so when a homeless person asks for money, then I give them like a fake $5 bill. So I feel good about myself, they feel good. And then when they go to use it, they get arrested. So I'm actually like helping clean up the community, you know, getting them off the street.
You know, and, you know, these people think that that's like alpha. They think that's manly. They think that that's masculine. That's just being a jerk. That's just being like a complete and total tool. Like, how foolish do you, like, you look like a total tool and utterly foolish for saying things like that. Like, who talks like that about people? It's really just such, you know, to behave that way. By the way, you're making videos of yourself admitting to felonies and just being cruel. It's just so pathetic. I mean, it truly is so pathetic. You can have all the privilege in the world and behave like that is so utterly pathetic. Finally, I want to show you this though right here. This is from the Biden-Harris Communications Director, Michael Tyler, about President Biden's infrastructure investments in places like Wisconsin. Because, folks, can we talk about issues, please? Can we talk about getting things done, please? Play this clip.
I think what you see today out of the president and Joe Biden is somebody who is talking about the promises that he's made and the promises that he has kept, fighting on behalf of working people across this country. In Wisconsin today, $3.3 billion in Racine, Wisconsin. This is the same place that Donald Trump came to when he was president with a golden shovel in his hand, promising the eighth wonder of the world and 13,000 jobs. The people of Wisconsin saw how that played out, right? People in places like Warren, Michigan, and Lordstown, Ohio, also saw how that played out when Donald Trump said, "You're not going to lose any auto jobs here," and the result was 6 auto plants closing under his watch. Well, here in Joe Biden's America, we're bringing American manufacturing back to America's shores. We've created 15 million jobs, and so that's the economic record that we're going to campaign on, and we're also going to pair that with the fundamental rights and freedoms that Joe Biden is running to protect and to advance, and contrast that, all of it, against Donald Trump, who again is running a campaign that's about himself and his own personal grievances.
Well, there you have it, folks. Judge for yourself. Donald Trump panicked, President Biden delivering.
It is Monday, the 13th of May of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, River City Hash Mondays. Yes, it's another Monday. We begin another week. Okay, well, it had to happen, and it has. So here we are, Cohen's testimony coming up, but before we even mention anything of that, I'd like to give you a little bit of a rundown about what happened over the weekend. Well, Friday was my mom's 87th birthday. So we get to celebrate the first birthday without her within a couple of weeks of when she passed. And then, of course, we all know yesterday was Mother's Day. So we got to quickly experience the first Mother's Day without Mom. And we're all still a bit numb. And a lot of work has to be done still on it's moving along as it should on the legal front. And I'll just let you know I'm entrusted to see that through. So a bit of responsibility, but there it is. I'm the oldest, so it's my responsibility. Anyway, sure do miss her, and we did get the death certificate, and it was the fall that caused her to have the brain bleed rather than a brain bleed causing the fall. Though the way that her room was, which was extremely dark, and I mentioned before, my mother never slept without a nightlight on. And she always had a light next to her on the night table, dimmed very, very low. It was always on. So we surmise that she may have been getting a headache from having a stroke. Felt the onset of it. Got up and fell. So, still have a sense of failure in the midst of that. I mean, I know you can't be there every second, but as the oldest, I felt that maybe I should have been there to catch her. Everybody says, don't go there. Well, it's very hard not to. You're entrusted with a great responsibility, and in the midst of it, even though the natural order of things says that this is going to happen, I just sort of thought maybe Mom would be with us a bit longer. Though I was doing all the avoidance, the behavior of wanting to believe something is different than what it really is. I didn't want to believe that she was getting more unsteady. I didn't want to believe that she was deteriorating a lot more. I just didn't want to admit it. I wanted to put a happy face on everything. I wanted her to live longer. I wanted her to smile. I wanted her to be happy. And I guess she was, but oh well. Such is life, as they say. Such is life. Okay, well, speaking of lively events, you got Cohen giving his testimony. Now, I want to remind everybody, indeed, he has admitted and owned up to the lies he told, and those lies that he told were to help Trump. But let's also not forget that he also lied about stuff on his own taxes and yada, yada, yada. So just because he is giving the kind of testimony that he's giving doesn't mean that he's any less of a mobster. He was a dick. He treated people like a dick. Or he was a dick treating people terribly. And let's be clear about that. Sammy the Bull did not stop being a mobster when he ratted out his associates. And I don't say ratted out as, a negative thing. Oh, you're a rat. He ratted them out. He had self-interest there. It wasn't because of any moral clarity. He remained a mobster, and even though he was given witness protection, he violated the rules several times, and they took him off. He may be back on now, but he was involved in drug running and any number of things. When he's under witness protection, he did not stop being a mobster and a crook, and I am sorry anybody who thought that their pinnacle of their business life was working with Donald Trump lacks the kind of moral clarity one would expect. from an honest broker. Okay. On another front, the pro-Hamas AstroTurf agitators are still at it. I had a pretty high follow account on Blue Sky come after me, calling me thoroughly dishonest because I asked simply, where were you guys when Assad gassed his people? And this account tried to gaslight me and say, we did. But as you and I know, we don't remember, and it's not because we have a brain worm eating our brains or that we've been brainwashed into believing something that's not true. There were no campus protests. There were no bridge takeovers. There were no Syrians harassed for simply being Syrians when Assad gassed his people. There was none of that. So don't tell me that I'm being dishonest because I asked, where were you about Assad? Oh, well, you would just bring that up. You're so thoroughly dishonest. Really? I don't broker with AstroTurf agitators. The guy said, you need to be muted, and I agreed. Yes, mute me. I refuse to be gaslit, and they will be hounded. Every one of us needs to hound them. And by hounding, I mean just putting out the truth. And let's also be clear, this lie that the Palestinian land was illegally taken away. No, it wasn't. It was the law. Were there inequities in the transfer of that property from one group of people or landlords, tenants in common, to another? Well, yeah. Eviction notices are rough. They're tough. They suck. But there could have been a middle ground in which everybody could have lived happily together. And that was not to be. And why? Because of anti-Semitism, etc., etc., etc. Let us not forget by and large, the power structure in that region of the world and its people worked hand in glove with Nazi Germany. Let us be clear about that. That is the history. There's been animosity, and people will do terrible things to get their get back. So even before the Jews of the world were allowed to have a little slip of land in which that was taken from them thousands and thousands of years ago, it doesn't dismiss the fact that they were displaced. Who came first? Who cares? There was a real genocide that happened. It was codified, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt had nothing to do with it. So bite me. You AstroTurf agitator gaslighting mofos. Don't even start. Oh boy. Okay. And then you got like MAGA types who think that they're embracing of the Israeli state will bring on the end of the world. Well, that's loving the Jews. God. The Jews. Yeah, we love the Jews, do you? I can tell. Okay. Well, all of that stated, I suppose we should just get into the curated part of the show, because I could keep going, but I'm not going to. And what do we have in store for you here on this fabulous River City Hash Mondays? Oh, my God, Trump panicked overnight about going to prison. Good. He oughta. It's about time he started thinking about his own future. Also like how the Midas guys brought in that wife beater guy that was handing out the counterfeit money. Everybody forgets. I mean, the reason he was first kicked off, they keep forgetting that, he was in some sort of sexual abuse charge. He beat the crap out of his wife and put her in the hospital. Please. And Trump was so mad that he had to give this guy a timeout. Well, all real men beat their wives, apparently, in MAGA land. They seem to think it's okay. Oh, yeah. We don't want red flag laws. That's going to stop a wife beater from doing his job. Beating his wife. It's hard work, keeping the little ladies in line. Which is sort of like what Trump's going through right now, because where is Melania? She got pissed about Barron being appointed as a potential delegate. At-large delegate. Yeah, talk about dynasty. I think she wants to bug out and get back to home, Slovenia, and she wants to take the kid with her, and the kid's not really a kid anymore because he's 18. But she was not happy about that, obviously, and where is she? You got J.D. Vance, you had Rick Scott the other day. Who else showed up today? J.D. Vance and I'm trying to think who else was there today. I forget, I'm sorry. Wasn't Gatz, it was somebody else. Can't get family to go. Oh, I know, we got Eric and Alina Habba. But where's Melania? Can you imagine if Dr. Jill didn't show up to anything that Joe was doing? We would not hear the end of it. There's trouble at the home front for Joe and Dr. Jill. Okay, well, so it goes. What's on the rest of the menu? The Wisconsin Supreme Court will hear arguments to expand the use of absentee ballot drop boxes, which was grossly restricted, so there were no absentee ballot drop boxes in the whole state because of the previous MAGA Supreme Court. And the people of Wisconsin were quite pissed, and now they don't have a MAGA Supreme Court. Good. Speaking of MAGA, the Office of Congressional Ethics found probable cause that MAGA representative from Texas, Troy Nehls, misused campaign funds. Those stogies he smokes don't come cheap. And Lake Tahoe is expected to fill for the first time in 5 years. See, lots of good things happen when it rains. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Poland's prime minister vowed to strengthen security at the EU border with Belarus. Good thing they are. And Lithuanians voted yesterday, Sunday, in a presidential election as anxieties rise over Russia and the war in Ukraine. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Are going to forego the usuals until maybe tomorrow so that we can tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, and it is by Scott Bauer from the Associated Press. The Wisconsin Supreme Court is scheduled to hear arguments today in a case pushed by Democrats to overturn a ruling that all but eliminated the use of absentee ballot drop boxes in the swing state. The court's ruling will come within 3 months of the August 13th primary and within 6 months of the November presidential election. He said November, but we know it's Rovember. A reversal could have implications on what is expected to be a razor-thin presidential race in Wisconsin. They keep saying that so that when Trump loses by massive amounts like last time, they can whine it was rigged. Yeah, they tried to rig it. President Joe Biden defeated Trump in Wisconsin by just under 21,000 votes in 2020, 4 years after Trump narrowly took the state by a similar margin, except they called it a landslide when Trump did it. Since his defeat, Trump had claimed without evidence that drop boxes led to voter fraud, meaning that he was unable to fraudulently get the election turned over because of all these votes that people voted, and he couldn't manipulate them. Democrats, election officials, and some Republicans argued that the drop boxes are secure. At issue is whether to overturn the Wisconsin Supreme Court's July 2022 ruling that said nothing in state law allowed for absentee drop boxes to be placed anywhere other than in election clerk offices, which they close, so that people can't get in there to drop off their ballots. Conservative justices controlled the court then, but the court flipped to liberal control last year, setting the stage to possibly overturn the ruling. Well, it flipped because voters, they vote for the Supreme Court justices there. And voters were finally able to break through the MAGA stranglehold. Changing the ruling now threatens to politicize this court and cast a pall over the election and unleash a new wave of illegal challenges. Attorneys for the Republican National Committee and the Wisconsin Republican Party argued in court filings. They always whine about what they do. There have been no changes in the facts or the law to warrant overturning the ruling, and it's too close to the election to make changes now anyway, they contend. It's always too close. Well, Democrats argue the court misinterpreted the law in its 2022 ruling by wrongly concluding that absentee ballots can only be returned to a clerk in their office and not to a drop box they control that is located elsewhere. Clerks should be allowed to decide for themselves how and where to accept the return of absentee ballots, attorneys argue in court filings. Priorities USA, a liberal voter mobilization group, and the Wisconsin Alliance for Retired Voters asked the court to reconsider the 2022 ruling. Democratic Governor Tony Evers and the Wisconsin Election Commission, which administers elections, support overturning it. Attorneys for the groups that brought the challenge say in court filings that drop boxes became controversial only when those determined to cast doubt on election results that did not favor their preferred candidates and causes made them a political punching bag. Election officials from 4 counties, including the 2 largest and most heavily Democratic in the state, filed a brief in support of overturning the ruling. They argue absentee ballot drop boxes have been used for decades without incident as a secure way for voters to return their ballots. More than 1,600 absentee ballots arrived at the clerk's offices after Election Day in 2022 when drop boxes were not in use and therefore were not counted. You see what they're doing? Democratic attorneys noted in their arguments about that fact. But in 2020, when drop boxes were in use and nearly 3 times as many people voted absentee, only 689 ballots arrived after the election. Drop boxes were used in 39 other states during the 2022 election, according to the Stanford MIT Healthy Elections Project. The popularity of absentee voting exploded during the pandemic in 2020, with more than 40% of all voters in Wisconsin casting mail ballots, and that was a record high. Kevin Fracking of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The independent office that reviews allegations against House members found probable cause that Representative Troy Nehls of Texas converted campaign funds to personal use, triggering an investigation by the House Ethics Committee. A new disclosure revealed the recommendation and the full report from the Office of Congressional Ethics were both released on Friday as required under the law. The leaders of the House Ethics Committee emphasized that the disclosure does not itself mean that a violation has occurred and stressed that the investigation into Nehls is ongoing. Nehls' lawyer told the committee the lawmaker did not profit from the arrangement that had raised red flags with the ethics office. Nehls, a second-term Republican lawmaker, was a county sheriff for 8 years before serving in the House. He is a staunch Donald Trump supporter who attended this year's State of the Union address wearing a T-shirt decorated with Trump's mugshot. The House of Congressional Ethics recommended the committee investigation in December by a vote of 6-0. The office sought to determine whether Nehls' campaign paid a company registered to the congressman for reasons other than legitimate campaign purposes. The office said Nehls' campaign committee made more than $25,000 in rental payments since late 2019 to an entity known as Liberty 1776 LLC. And that a review of state records shows that Nehls is the registered agent for the company. The report notes that campaigns cannot spend money for personal use, and that prohibition includes the purchase or lease of services from the member himself. The office said Nehls declined to cooperate with his investigation, and due to that lack of cooperation, no witnesses could confirm that the payments made to Liberty 1776 were for legitimate campaign purposes. The report also stated that Nehls did not disclose any income derived from Liberty 1776 on his financial disclosure forms required for members and candidates. Times brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Lake Tahoe is expected to fill for the first time in 5 years, courtesy of recent and unusually wet winters. Only unusual because they haven't happened for a while. The lake last filled up in June of 2019, but snowmelt should be sufficient to fill it this spring. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture report that was released this month. Once full, the stored water in the lake typically provides sufficient supply for 3 years, even if future snowpacks are below normal, according to the report. The water year continues through September, but it is already a safe bet to pencil in a win on this year's report card, especially for northern Nevada, the report states. The report noted that this winter snowpack peaked above median due to strong precipitation in January, February, and March, and snowpacks were above normal in May, despite a dry April and areas of record snowmelt. Additionally, a high soil moisture is expected to help with an efficient runoff. The report credited last year's late melting snow, aided by Hurricane Hillary midsummer, as helping start water year 2024 well above normal. Well, that's good news, isn't it? And it is also news that we will take with us through our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, The Fallen Guys and Gals. It seems one of the hardest things to do in movies is to present believable relationships, not just in how people love each other, but why. And I get it. Why we fall in love is complicated and often not quick. You got less than 2 hours, so just tell us they love each other and leave the heart of the coupling, or tripling, or whatever, a black box. Also, most movies are done by cishet men who, with relationships, are most interested in talking about desire, acquiring them, or maintaining them, and not about the guts of why you bother in the first place. This hand-waving has worked less and less for me as time has gone on. Take last week's movie Challengers. I got that the trio's relationship dominated their lives for a decade or more, but what did she see in those guys? What did they see in her? What did they see in each other? I didn't understand why any of them were together, and thus I didn't buy them being together, and thus I didn't care if they were or weren't. And I don't think the movie makers cared either. They were just about the volley, the back and forth of the game, leaving us, or maybe just me, with an elaborately crafted shell around a hollow core. So, of the many things I enjoyed about The Fall Guy, what I enjoyed most is that they didn't do that. Before the movie was over, I knew why Ryan Gosling's Colt Seavers loved Emily Blunt's Jodie Moreno. The movie showed me and not just told me, and I bought that relationship. I cared about it, I was rooting for it, which is important because as much as The Fall Guy is smart and funny and full of action, as much as director David Leitch, former stuntman himself, has made this movie a love letter to stunt people, at its core, The Fall Guy's main question is, do Colt and Jodie get a happy ending? With the mantra of the stunt person being a lesson for their love and lives, you get hit, it hurts, you fall down, you get back up. Could have been a trite message, but I found it, like the movie, sincere and heartfelt. And thus, I fell for it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. My stunt double for the really difficult to say phrases was Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The discovery of penicillin in 1928 by Alexander Fleming was one of the greatest scientific achievements of the 20th century. It's hard to imagine a world before the development of what many consider to be miracle drugs. However, just 90 years ago, antibiotics weren't available. Thanks to antibiotics, some common illnesses such as strep throat are now easily treated, whereas in the past they often led to serious complications. Antibiotics serve an important role in keeping you and your loved ones healthy, but it's important to remember that antibiotics only treat bacterial infections. Most common infections such as colds, flu, most sore throats, bronchitis, and many sinus and ear infections are caused by viruses and do not respond to antibiotic treatment. These infections can be overcome by simply treating the symptoms and letting the illness run its course. Unfortunately, antibiotics have often been overused, resulting in decreased effectiveness and an increase in antibiotic-resistant diseases. Antibiotic resistance, or the increased ability of bacteria to survive in the presence of antibiotics, has become a major public health threat that we all need to help fight. When a person takes antibiotics, they are at risk for possibly having a bad reaction to these drugs. Some side effects can be quite serious, or even life-threatening in the case of an allergic reaction or severe diarrhea. This is why it is very important to only use antibiotics when they are absolutely needed, and not for viral infections. Talk to your healthcare professional about the best treatment for your illness. If it is caused by a virus, follow his or her recommendation for treating the symptoms. Learn more about appropriate antibiotic use and how to feel better when you don't need an antibiotic by visiting CDC's Get Smart, Know When Antibiotics Work website at cdc.gov/getsmart/community.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. A New York State appeals court upheld a new state law allowing any state resident to vote by mail during the early voting period. New York and national Republican committees, along with a New York congresswoman, had sued to prevent unfettered access to mail-in ballots. The New York Early Mail Voter Act was signed by Governor Kathy Hochul last September and immediately challenged by no less than Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, the Republican National Committee, the New York Republican State Committee, the National Republican Congressional Committee, and the Conservative Party of New York. They and other plaintiffs argued that the law is an unconstitutional end run around the New York State Constitution, which stipulates absentee voting is allowed only when the citizen is absent from the county or due to an illness or disability. The Albany Times-Union reports that the state Supreme Appellate Court unanimously upheld a lower court's ruling on May 9th, finding the law constitutional and affirming the legislature's power to enact it. In the court's opinion, quote, the New York Constitution contains no requirement, express or implied, mandating that voting occur in person on Election Day. Barring further appeal, the New York Early Mail Voter Act will be in place for the November 2024 general election. We have a link to the opinion, the text of the bill, and an Albany Law School analysis at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Veal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day workers at Tolteca Foods in Richmond, California, went out on strike. Many were undocumented Mexican women who helped organize the plant in 1969. In his book, The Revolutionary Imaginations of Greater Mexico, historian Alan Aledo Gomez states that the women had grown increasingly frustrated with the lack of union response regarding speed-ups, immigration raids, discretionary firings, substandard wages and unsafe working conditions, and began to look elsewhere for support. They reached out to the organization CASA, which provided legal and social services for undocumented immigrants. The women decided to strike without authorization from the Contra Costa Labor Council. They packed the council's emergency meeting, where they put their scarred bodies on display to attest to the dangerous and abusive working conditions and poor wages. Just as the council sanctioned the strike, workers learned the company started removing machinery from the factory. They packed the picket lines to stop the trucks from taking out the equipment. The first driver stopped. The second plowed through several women. The strike committee won an injunction to prevent the removal of equipment, and after 3 weeks, workers won their demands. Gomez argues the strike was important for several reasons. It demonstrated that a large female and undocumented workforce could organize and win a strike against a transnational company at a moment when unions were increasingly under attack. They built a rank-and-file independence that built support for their demands from their union leaders and the broader community. The women workers at Tolteca fought for bread and butter issues. They also worked to reshape their union to take on broader issues of social justice that included immigration rights and women's rights. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting temperatures much cooler than what we had over the weekend. We are slated for highs only in the mid-80s, with plentiful sunshine and winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. A few clouds overnight with lows in the low 50s, winds coming out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then partly cloudy skies tomorrow, with highs once again in the mid-80s, winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated very high here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 19 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at level 8. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.04 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 65 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 72 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 77 and sunny. Kabul is 65 and clear. Hong Kong is 73 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 60 and cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 56 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 73 and partly cloudy, and New York is 56 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk on Saturday traveled to the country's border with Belarus, which is also the European Union's external border with the autocratic state, and pledged to do more to strengthen security along its entire eastern frontier. Tusk accused Belarus, Russia's ally, of intensifying what he called a hybrid war against the West by encouraging migrants to try to cross into the EU. He vowed that Poland would spare no expense on its border security. I know that there are more and more illegal crossings every day, Tusk told reporters at the border, where he met with Polish army soldiers, border guard officers, and police. He also cited the growing threat resulting from the Russian-Ukrainian war, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and the uncertain geopolitical situation. The visit to the border, Tusk's first since he took office in December, comes after a Polish judge defected to Belarus this month. He claimed he was facing persecution in Poland, a democracy, but officials have denounced him as a traitor, and he is being investigated on suspicion of espionage. Tusk replaced a national security party at odds with the EU over rule of law issues. That party, Law and Justice, no relation, took a strong stance against migration in a way that set it at odds with other European allies when it first took power in 2015. Since then, though, the general mood against migration across Europe has toughened. While Tusk does not use some of the harsh anti-migrant rhetoric of his predecessors, he too is opposed to unregulated migration. This is not only Poland's internal border, but also the border of the European Union. Therefore, I have no doubt that all of Europe will have to, and I know that we will achieve this, invest in its security by investing in Poland's eastern border and in the security of our border, Tusk said. He added that he made a declaration to the commanders of the security forces at the border. There are no limits on resources when it comes to Poland's security. A crisis erupted along the EU's eastern border with Belarus in 2021 when large numbers of migrants from the Middle East and Africa began arriving there. The EU accused Belarusian leader Lukashenko of encouraging the migration to destabilize the EU after it imposed sanctions on the country for an election widely viewed as fraudulent. Poland's previous government, that right-wing Law and Justice, well, they responded to the crisis by, guess what? Constructing a tall steel wall. Hard-working staff at the Associated Press World Desk brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Lithuanians voted in a presidential election yesterday, Sunday, at a time when Russian gains on the battlefield in Ukraine are fueling greater fears about Moscow's intentions, particularly in the strategically important Baltic region. The popular incumbent, Gitanas Nausėda, was favored to win another 5-year term in office, but there were 8 candidates running in all, making it difficult for him or any other candidate to muster the 50% of the votes needed to win outright. In that case, a runoff will be held on May 26. Polls closed at 8 p.m. local time. Initial voter turnout was 59.4%, higher than in the previous election in 2019. Results were expected sometime early today. The president's main tasks in Lithuania's political system are overseeing foreign and security policy and acting as the supreme commander of the armed forces. That adds importance to the position in the relatively small nation, given that it is located strategically on NATO's eastern flank, as tensions rise between Russia and the West over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.
In West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit.